Okay, I cannot not do this, so I will. Kasakai, Barai, I am Mumbai. We are talking about the greatest metropolis in India. Is there any other city in India that can rival Mumbai? I guess not. Bombay or Mumbai, from the maximum city to the only city, has always been an eternal muse. There's something about Mumbai that keeps calling for more stories, more reflections, and more reckonings. Today, we explore The Only City, an anthology of 18 short stories by writers who share an intimate and personal bond with the city, focusing on Mumbai's contemporaneity, yeah, through the voices of some of the finest writers in Indian fiction. This collection captures the city from multiple angles, revealing its beauty, brutality, and boundless energy. Anindita Ghosh is the editor of this anthology, an author and journalist. Her debut novel, Illuminated, was published in 2021. Joining her are Ranjit Hoskote, poet, art critic, and independent curator. A Sahitya Academy awardee, Hoskote has also contributed to this anthology. Joining him again is Shubhangi Swarup, a journalist and award-winning author for a book, Latitudes of Longing. She too has contributed to this anthology. Her story, Snakeskin, captures the forever morphing Bombay that imposes metamorphosis on its inhabitants. So, with that, I'm going to leave this open to you. Do you need another third mic, right?
It's always risky talking about our love for another city while we are in a different place, but I think audiences in Goa are very accommodating and loving, so we'll go with that. Um, Not a lot of you were at the opening address yesterday, so I want to do a callback to what Easterine Kire said in her keynote. Given that the theme of this festival since the beginning has been ways of belonging. And she was talking about, Ranjit, you were there, so add if you see fit. She was talking about the danger in culture, in the culture sphere, to label things as the mainstream and the margins, which brings us to the question of what is the mainstream, who is the margin. So when we speak about an anthology on Bombay, related to what she was saying, I wonder who is allowed to write about Bombay. Not everybody in this anthology, not it's 18 stories by 18 writers. I have edited it and I have one story. Shubhangi and Ranjit have a story each. Not all the writers in the anthology are born and brought up in Bombay. Ranjit, you are born and brought up in Bombay, I believe.
I was also partly brought up in Goa, so when I'm
Okay.
in Goa, I claim my dual citizenship.
And so for people like Ranjit or Namita Devi Dayal, their stories in The Only City are set in the neighborhoods that they are so familiar with. Shubhangi and I are not born in Bombay, but we moved to Bombay as very little children and call ourselves Bombay girls. Um, for me, the filter, if I had to pick the filter of, everybody in these anthologies, somebody who's lived in Bombay all their life or identifies as a kind of born and brought up person, it would be rather too much of an academic exercise. The filter for me was that the quality of the writer's relationship with the city, for me, I feel each writer has an almost alchemic relationship with the city in the sense that Bombay changed them in some way. I want to start with, I believe you're asking questions to each other. So, Ranjit, I want to start with asking you, if you had to write in an anthology on any other city, which other cities would you be comfortable belonging to in that sense? And a second part to that question is, who can be in an anthology of Bombay stories?
I thought we were going to start in a fairly relaxed sort of way, but we've obviously leaped into it. Gosh, in the first place, I have to say, with the amount of crazy redevelopment going on in our shared neighborhood, when you said there are 18 stories, my first thought was, gosh, there are like 18 floors to this building. But that's just, I say that only half in jest. I think part of the problem with Bombay is that it's today simply seen through the lens of real estate, through a certain kind of politics. I think what an anthology like this, which takes its place in a history of other anthologies, some of which are more historical, which chronicle multiple languages. I think it reminds us that a city in the first place is a polyphony, any great city. And it's not really about who belongs there by some kind of birthright. It's about taking note of the fact that a great metropolis is always created through mobilities. People come there from elsewhere. They've always come there from elsewhere. So, to your point about who has the right to talk about Bombay, I think the answer would be people who've invested themselves affectively, intellectually, worked in its institutions, or literally just wandered through it and absorbed themselves into the city. I think there are as many cities as there are storytellers about that city. You had another question, which was which other city?
Yeah.
For all kinds of reasons, I think that would have to be Berlin for me. Yeah. But Goa is a long, but I don't see Goa as a city. It's a region. I spent some of the best years of my childhood here. So that's, for me, I always say this, when I come here, I don't come here, I always come back here. But that's another story. I think when we're talking about a city, we're also talking about a place of tensions and of claims and counterclaims. So maybe that's something we could talk about, because that's implicit in your question. Like what are these, what claim is each one of these storytellers making on the city?
What I find singular about Bombay also is that somebody can be in Bombay for 3 weeks and feel like they completely belong, unlike, say, Calcutta or even Delhi in that sense. So I feel, like I said, it's the quality of your relationship to the city rather than the linguistic relationship or the duration of your stay. I wonder, Shubhangi, if you have something to add to that as a Bombay girl who's moved to Goa some years ago.
I mean, sorry, I was lost in the conversation just listening. Uh, well, I'm one of those hopeless people who carries the spirit of Mumbai inside, you know. I can't hide my Mumbai stripes no matter where I am. Um, my first and only novel was set in all kinds of obscure and foreign places because I wanted to get as far away as I could from Mumbai and write um, in a more evocative manner. I was searching for something, but the further I went, the closer it got me home. Like, for example, little things like bargaining, haggling, picking a fight, not picking a fight, but when we walk in Mumbai, you know, it doesn't matter what size we are. If something happens, we have an opinion. In Delhi, you can't do that, right? You can't pick a fight with an auto guy or something. But I realized all these tics about me. Or in Kathmandu, I had placed myself in a dance bar for my book, and I posed as a pimp in order to sort of get, you know, the grit. Like, it would be really lame if I went there as a researcher. So once I was trying to, you know, haggle and, you know, I just posed as a trafficker from Mumbai saying, oh, my father-in-law is from Nepal and we need some women from Kathmandu. To abhi batao, you know, what should we do? And I really found the Mumbaikar in me come out when they said we'll charge 1 lakh. And I was like, no way. I got into that spirit for Mumbaikar, nahi abhi Diwali mein bhi chutti. You know, these are the kind of arguments we have. How much are you earning? How many holidays are you going to take? So it's one of those hopeless situations with me. Wherever I am, my stripes come out after a few hours. I start behaving like a Mumbaikar. And I have been in Goa for a while. And one trade secret about my story is that it's more Goa than Mumbai. I'll be honest. It's called snake skin. Um, a lot of snakes have been visiting me in my time in Goa. And this idea of belonging, you know, do I belong to a city? Do I belong to an island? Do I belong to a coast? Do I belong to the Western Ghats? What am I rooted to? I'm really exploring that for myself, like almost like as a spiritual question. And I see no conflict between these two places. I feel like parts of Goa is how I imagine Mumbai would have been before it became such a crowded, chaotic, polluted place, you know. Like, I wonder, is this how our mangroves were? Is this how our biodiversity was? We have dolphins in Mumbai. We have pythons. We have so much biodiversity, and it's almost like a longing when I live in Goa. Like, is this how it was for us too?
Wondering if I could respond to that. Uh, Also, for me, in this story, which, well, we're really hoping you'll buy this book, of course. But in my story, it's the narrator, who is unreliable, is also dead. So he speaks across an arc of a century. And in telling that story, I suddenly found myself coming back from the kind of scale that I normally work at, whether it's in theory or in poetry. The scale tends to be much more continental and oceanic. And here, I was really looking at someone who was a neighbor, and a Bombay artist who lived in the neighborhood. So for me, it was like pulling the compass back in two lanes that I knew intimately well, a neighborhood I knew, the career of a painter who had played a very important role in I'm going to say simply the artist on whom my character is named, but based. And that seemed to me to be a way also of thinking back to lost layers of the city's history, but not told in terms of history. It's also told through the tonality of resentment and rivalry, professional jealousy, enmity verging on hostility, things that I hadn't necessarily wanted to look at about the city, but which I think, having gone through the 80s and the 90s in the city, times of great turbulence, uh, I felt that I needed to bear witness to that as well. Because we're often talking about how Bombay is this great cosmopolitan, inclusive city, but it's also a city of contested identities, of violence. There's an entire history of insiders versus outsiders. So I wanted to take something of that seemingly negative energy and see if one could turn that into material for a story. But on that note, Anindita, could we draw you out now? Because your story also is based on what I earlier spoke of as mobilities, people coming in from elsewhere and crafting new intimate and social relationships.
Because the brief, and I want to actually ask both of you after this how you responded to the brief, because I feel I've spent the last 3 months talking about my idea for the anthology, and I want to know how that landed. But because the brief for the anthology was not to anchor on nostalgia or landmarks, but to anchor on a Bombay character, and both of you did that in some way. I think the writers did it in different levels of uh, engagement with the brief. For me, the idea of this young couple drawn from two different steel towns, and that was interesting to me because I've visited an aunt who lived in Jamshedpur, every summer. The steel towns have every requirement. You're familiar with Jamshedpur as well. So they'll have good schools till 12th standard. They have the parks, there's sports and music, there's good hospitals, or at least one. So they have what as humans we now believe is needed for a township. But but then they miss what a real city, a true city offers. So most people who grew up in the steel towns, of course, they leave after class 12 and they come either to Pune or to Delhi or to Bangalore to study. So this is a young couple in their mid-30s who come from two different steel towns. And the idea of Bombay that I wanted to kind of hit upon through their story was that when they go to a farmer's market dressed in crushed linen like everybody else, no one asks them where they are from. Because to some level, they are a bit embarrassed that they are not from a big city, although they are now the city's avocado eating elite. So the external markers of, the culture they participate in and the real estate they purchase is what they thought was what people do in big cities. So I like this idea of what does it mean to fit in. And in my story, I think the 35-year-old woman at the cusp of possibly parenthood, but who is in a, she had a good job, she's in a significantly happy marriage, but now she wants more and she doesn't know what that is. And what defines Bombay for me, another word is covetousness. I feel a lot of the characters in this book, they have things that externally look good. The nurse in Tejaswini's story has a good job, but now she wants a job in Dubai. The woman in Dharani's story is in a happy marriage, but now she wants love as well. So I feel that Bombay wants you to want more, and the steel couple in my story, they don't know what the more is because they already have what they thought they wanted. So it's this dilemma of, but something is still missing and we don't know what that is. And that is very Bombay to me.
Just desire.
Yeah, I like the word covetousness because there's a certain gray tone to it, but it could also be helpful for an artist or for certain people. I want to ask both of you how the kernel of your story evolved. Shubhangi was the only writer to whom I had a little more of a specific brief than others because Shubhangi and I had spoken about some time ago, you had spoken about the need for stories told from beyond the anthropomorphic point of view, which is something you've done in your novel, Latitudes of Longing, a bit. And she said, Anindita, why is everything told from, the perspective of a human? And why do we see the world from the height of a human? And when I was thinking of Bombay, I was, of course, thinking of the street dogs. And I had this idea of a story told from the perspective of a street dog in VT station. And I think that was one of the early
And I complied.
conversations. And then there is no dog in Shubhangi's story at all, except maybe a dog that is peeing somewhere. But
There's a
she did.
human being on the
That's a
wall.
human being. Yeah, there's no dog. But she did respond in the sense of a story which goes beyond the kind of human storytelling aspect. But I want to ask you how you arrived at it and what made you think it's a story that belongs in a Bombay anthology. Because, like you said, it could be a Goa story.
Well, this is a tough one because the brief,
You've
as
forgotten the brief.
as much as I wanted to, be loyal to it, um, it left the story a while ago when I was writing it. Um, I started off also with this idea of urban legends. I've been trying to research urban legends in Mumbai, and I haven't come across many. And they're generally quite disappointing because they're like corrupted by this Bollywood idea of what a legend should be. Some woman got murdered and a ghost roams around, or something like that. So I thought, okay, I have a snake. Let's gift my city this cool urban legend. Then of course we all carry the baggage of having watched Nagin and Nagina in our childhood. And I was like, no, that's not my snake, you know. And slowly, like, as I started to listen to the character or, like, noticing snakes in the neighborhood, even in Goa, the way they come in and out, it struck me that so there is the ghost of a snake in my story who comes and keeps knocking on this rich guy's door saying, I used to live here. And he gets freaked out. So, in a way, this idea of inhabitants, ghosts, longing, her longing, the snake's longing to have been in this patch where it found happiness or whatever. I don't want to say happiness. I'm just trying to. What happens when I insert a snake in a neighborhood? And if I do it literally, then it becomes a literal story about human man versus animal rather than an emotion. To explore that idea of belonging, to actually bring empathy to this equation and bring in geological time, I had to give it that element of magic and transformation. And as my friend asked, this the protagonist is a girl with a body dysmorphic disorder, which sadly we see this so much, because of this covetousness or desire in Bombay. You have so many people who have body issues, are constantly longing to be someone else or looking like someone else. I thought that would be a good inroad into exploring transition and snakeskin and things like that. Sorry.
Shubhangi, in your story, the protagonist, while she is not very happy with the world for making her feel the way she feels about her body, there are a lot of comments about the pollution, the construction, the feeling of being cornered, lacking space. It's rather quite. There are a bunch of scathing lines about the city, which are all true. And I find that interesting in a bunch of stories. In Yogesh Maitreya's story, the Dalit protagonist says Bombay was too loud for him to hear the sound of his own thoughts. Or in Lindsay Pereira's story, which is about a life cycle of a street urchin outside Grant Road Station, says that Bombay has the relentless promise of giving you something without ever giving you anything. And to me, it was interesting and important that if you are, I love Bombay and I'm an unabashed Bombay fan. When Paromita Vora in the previous session with Karanjit said she loves being in love with people and with things, Bombay is an eternal love story. But a lot of the stories, they are not all love letters. I think your story is critical of how humans interact, but not of the city itself, a kind of a falseness in the pursuit of culture and prestige. But I like the idea that these are not 18 love letters, because I feel when you look at something or someone or a city truly and closely with love, you have to accept it with all its flaws. You wanted to say something.
No, just to say that with my story, that the the debate, so to speak, is outside the story. It rests in the choice of character, because this is where two of my lives come together. One is the literary life, the task of writing a story, the pleasure of writing a story, but also the life in art criticism and in cultural theory, where I've often felt that the overemphasis in a certain way that we tell the story of modern Indian art, there tends to be an overemphasis on the progressive artists group, and they were amazing artists indeed. But it's like the story begins in 1948 or so. It completely elides what the art scene in Bombay was like in the 20s and the 30s, and went on continuously right through into the 60s. So my particular character, my protagonist, my narrator, comes out of that other world, which too often gets dismissed as, they were just salon artists, they were somehow colonial. So I wanted to bring in something of the thrum of what that other art world was like. What was it like to balance between being, of course, a society painter, a salon artist, but also working very closely with a completely different stratum within Bombay. So what was it like to, on the one hand, flatter the sitter, and on the other hand, to just be extremely raw and visceral in the kind of art you were making? Or also, how did some of these artists, as the protagonist does, explore this larger
We
world?
can name the names, right? You live in a street that is named after the artist who was the inspiration for your story.
Dhurandhar is who it's
Yeah,
based on.
yeah.
So how did somebody like Dhurandhar and others that
I mean, Dhurandhar means something completely
Oh
different
my God, I
for
completely forgot that
people
dreadful
here
film.
now. When somebody
Yes.
first told me about the film, "Have you seen Dhurandhar?" I said, "There's a biography of the artist."
My first thought as well.
And they said, "You're very clueless, Anindita."
Yeah, so to specify, old Dhurandhar, the artist. I've been fascinated by how artists then didn't simply place themselves on this great plane of only producing art for its own sake or for the patron's sake. They also got their hands dirty working with graphic arts, produced things for the newspapers and the magazines. So it was also a way of bearing witness to this other history of image making in Bombay and its circulation, away from the elevated world of galleries and museums and so on. And as I said, it was really, some of it came out of a childhood experience of having been taken by my mother to see Dhurandar's daughter. They literally lived around the corner. And to have this amazing experience of his paintings, which were still there, and I was 9 or 10 or something like that. And
So you're the little boy.
He is the
I
little
am
boy.
the little boy.
And to see the Maru flash, we've had more than one person tell us, even on a panel, that they had to Google a lot while reading your story. Um,
I'll come back to
the
that part
Maru
about
flash. Yes.
I've sometimes wondered about that response. I think Google is wonderful in many ways, but I think it takes away from the fact that we all, not we all, I mean, some of us who are old enough, grew up reading things where there were many, many details that we couldn't possibly have had a complete sense of, or names or historical references. But there were other ways of looking up things, which you did after the moment of wonderment or being intrigued by something. So that's just a brief comment on how we now read, I think. But if it adds layers to people's discovery of a story, that's terrific too.
But your story, Ranjit, covers a span of around 80 years. More ambiguous. I know Dharini and me, while we were editing your story, were trying desperately to put timelines to it, and his ghost defied that timeline. As a journalistic editor, I get quite obsessed with detail and dates, and this
I
is not
realized you
adding
didn't
up.
when you mentioned them discovering those Buddhist caves, right? Yeah, that's a giveaway that it's ambiguous, right?
Some of those details are made up, some things are moved around, and the ghost tells you plainly, says he's lost his grip on time anyway. So
So your story covers a rather ambiguous swath of time. Your story is set in within a few days, I would say. There's one story that is set entirely, Pratyusha's story, in one train ride. It's about cruising in a specific compartment of a Bombay local, which, if you're queer and move to Bombay, you are told that the second compartment from the end of the Virar local is where you go, and you can do as you wish. So I like that the stories cover different timelines, but the book is meant to be a kind of literary freeze frame of Bombay as it is today. So even your story, the sense that it's written from the perspective of today and then you move back and forth. Since we were talking about love, I want to read a few paragraphs from the editor's introduction about my relationship with Bombay, and then I will, since I've already written it, I'm just going to read. You guys have the tougher task of having to say something on your own, so you can think while I'm reading
About
about
love.
your relationship with Bombay. Yeah. Do you want to go first before I read? Okay. When people say Bombay smells of garbage and rotting fish, the homes are too small, there are too few green spaces, the traffic is unbearable, the roads are riddled, the poor have been unfairly moved near toxic landfills, the city still isn't rain ready, I know it's all true, except that the fish are drying, not rotting. I'm a romantic, but I'm not wholly delusional. I spend reams of time wondering what it is that I love. That I love is irrefutable. It is hard not to love. Even my Bengali parents, who moved here from Kolkata and Delhi and tried steadfastly to keep the city out of our home through my childhood and teenage years. No Hindi movies, river fish over sea fish, Darjeeling tea over chai, now love. They have finally left behind the mangoes of their childhood and become besotted by the Alfonso. And Vivek Menezes once wrote a piece for Mint Lounge about the origins of the Alfonso being from here. So I wanted to make that aside. Admittedly, Bombay is no city of joy, of lights, lakes, hills, those trifling things from which many other metropolises draw their names. It is not a place of aching beauty, but it carries a quality of everyday pageantry. A sea laps at its edges all the way from the north to the south. It is Dolby Digital thunder and torrential rain pelting down. It is a film shoot in that chalk blue cottage in Bandra. It is Dadar flower market at dawn, a diaphanous pink dupatta fluttering out of the ladies' compartment, the soundtrack of Muhammad Ali Road at noon, the TV actor pretending to shield their face from paparazzi they've paid, the family of four savoring kala khutta golas at Juhu Beach on a Sunday evening. Is it any coincidence that Bombay is shaped like a continent? The city holds countries. In the Andheri building where I grew up, each of the four flats on our floor housed a different word for mother. So there it is. One thing I love about Bombay is the people who make it up. If all the people of the city were replaced with people from another city, it would not be Mumbai as it stands now. One could argue that would be true for most cities, but it is truer for some cities more than others. I will let you go next about what is singular about Bombay. And I see so many Bombay folks in the audience, and I want them to maybe add to when we open up for questions. Yeah.
Some of them seem wisely to have escaped Bombay. You know, as you were reading, I was, in a sense, I think I probably feel a little guilty about having always had a kind of outsider sense about Bombay, which is strange. I was born there, but moved here with my parents when I was one. So the early years were here. And I think it took me a very long time when we went back to Bombay to really get used to the city. And I think that that sense of not being quite at home there has remained over all these many, many years. So I don't know if alienation from a city can also be a productive place from where you can bear witness to it. So I think for me that's very much at the center of my relationship to Bombay, being an insider in many ways. Also over the years having participated in its cultural life and contributed to it. But there's always a sense of being somehow outside of its momentum and its crises. And I think the story also emerges in a way from there because through the story, in a way, what's insistent is realities of landscape and seascape. I found myself focusing very much on what seems to me to be the elemental substratum of the city, on which the city rises in a way, and which it denies. I think the presence of water, I've always been struck by how in Bombay we turn away from the water in fundamental ways. I think this has partly to do with the colonial mapping of and access to the waterfronts. It's always seen through a largely bureaucratic and military lens. But I'm struck by how also the only relationship we cultivate with water is what we call reclamation. You know, there's a kind of a sovereign sense that this stuff that belongs to the water, it's a waste there. The water doesn't need it. We should take it back. It never belonged to us to begin with, which is what then leads to the destruction of the mangroves, the complete wrecking of the continental shelf and its ecosystem, overfishing. This now is away from, but it informs this story. It informs this sense of disquiet. I think my relationship to Bombay is primarily under the sign of disquiet.
The sea does make itself heard and seen in your story and several stories, I would say one third. But you're right in the sense that there isn't a real sense of engagement with it. It's there. It's there as some kind of a romantic idea of I come from a city without a sea, as Dharini's protagonist says. Or in my story, when Arvind and Aparna are sitting on the kind of seafront in Worli, they're saying the scene was different 20 years ago. So it's not really a character, and I guess it's the sea is often even thought of as a nuisance in Bombay. For flats too close to the sea, all your electronics are always ruined. We don't really enjoy its beauty. Shubhangi, I wonder if there's something you'd like to add about what Ranjit said regarding distance. Has being away from Bombay helped you see it more clearly? Do you think it'll make itself visible in your next book or in what you're writing now in a way that it wasn't really in your first novel?
Interestingly, yes. I mean, that's what struck me. So, firstly, uh, I'm rooted in Mumbai. I want to stay away from words like love and what is so, what is this singular, characteristic or unique about Mumbai. Um, I'm rooted in the city, but I'll be honest, it's a city I grew up in, but now I choose not to raise my children there at a great cost. My parents are there, my spouse is there, but it's become untenable at so many levels. Not just the AQI and the pollution, but also the love for screen, the kind of, the obsession with consumerism at all levels. So I have, what shall I say? I'm actively engaging with my relationship with the city right now. Now that I have stepped away from it, I want to write about it. Of course, that's what we do, right? And I feel like we have a little bit of a low self-esteem, when it comes to the city and its the Mumbaikars. The way we look at our tree, I I was at Literature Live having a discussion with the children about biodiversity of the city, and they were like, "Yeah, we went to Singapore and we saw dolphins," and I was like, "We also have dolphins." Oh, I went there and I saw these trees, and it was like, "We have baobabs," So it's also we have somehow. Naturalize it as a kind of privilege that we will step out for nature, we will step out for beautiful things because it doesn't exist within the city. And I feel like that's a little bit of a low self esteem because there is so much um, around us also. It's not, you don't always need a tiger, even an ant or a sea slug sometimes is magical enough. So that's where I'm at right now. How do I tackle this? I feel the low self esteem is for every individual and it's also a reflection in the city, but I have to tackle it at both levels. Yeah.
I think she wants to open up for questions after, but please go.
We might be wandering off topic here or circling back to topic.
I think it's friends here, so it's fine.
Because in yet another of my lives, I've been writing about Patrick Geddes, who founded Bombay University Sociology Department. But he was a Scottish town planner and a botanist, and he actually drew up the town plans, the city plans of about 48 Indian cities and small towns, including Indore, Dhaka, Tanjore, and so on and so forth. But his main point was that you can't conceive of an Indian city without its water courses and water bodies the and its vegetation in diverse forms. But the way we've gone in terms of our understanding of cities and urban planning, the focus is exclusively on built form, largely. Yeah. Everything else is either ornamental or you need to get rid of it.
On the outskirts.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
marginalized.
marginalized.
Yeah. Now that you say it,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a city that actually has a national park in it.
Yeah.
But it's just that we tend to focus on built form and human settlement when we think about the city. So maybe there's an argument for us to completely reimagine how we look at Bombay.
Absolutely. Is it Seven Islands? There was some detail that has struck me. The last free tiger was seen in Juhu in the 1970s or some. I may have got it like your ghost. I've got my timeline skewed. But that stays with me, when I go to Juhu Beach, that there was a tiger roaming around here.
What really got me is when this article that I read today, in fact, was that there's less than 9 square feet of open space per person. Per person in Bandra, which I thought was just shocking. From having
In Bombay or in
in
Bandra?
Bandra, they're talking about specifically in Bandra, but a place that had so-called so much of open space. There's less than that, so which is shocking. I'd like to open this for more questions.
Hi, I'm Aarti. This is actually a comment more than a question. I lived in Mumbai. No, sorry, Bombay. I don't like to say Mumbai for about 5 years, but I lived on the same road as the gateway, so it felt like I was living in a different city. And when I moved to Gurgaon, is when I realized, like, I love Bombay so much. And I wrote a piece in this magazine I used to write for called Verve, Help, I Want to Come Back. And everybody kept saying, we're moving to such a beautiful city, there's so much of greenery. I said, but what about the people? And talking about people, the first curated show that I actually saw in Mumbai was Ranjit's show at the NGMA. And I took my son to the show, and the first thing you entered, I don't know if you remember this, Ranjit, there's this statue with this guy who's totally naked, who has the most extraordinarily large balls. So my son goes and says, how come he's not wearing chaddis? Do you remember this show, Ranjit? Yes. Yeah, yeah. The first, I think, first show at NGMA when they first opened that. Wasn't it the first show, I
No,
guess?
it wasn't the inaugural show, but it was part of a very early edition of the Kalagora Festival.
Yeah, so that's my introduction to NGMA and to art in Mumbai.
Yeah, these days I think they would prefer statues, sculptures like that to have their chaddis on,
I know.
preferably
I know.
khaki chaddis.
Yes, yes, yes. I love the city, and I'd give anything to go back. And it reminds me so much of New York, actually, with the same kind of water, same kind of energy, and the same kind of wanting and coveting something more, even if you live in Manhattan. So I think that's something similar. I love both the cities. So
We're signing copies after the talk.
I think everyone's just.
My question is why 18 and how did you choose the contributors?
Very difficult question, both parts of it. When I thought of putting together an anthology, I thought of a dozen stories. I thought that's a good number. I had I wouldn't say mediocre, I would say a slightly above mediocre ambition for what I wanted this to be. I was in between novels and feeling really nervous as a novelist that, it's going to take 4 years to write the next book. And I had a story in mind and I wanted to place it. So the initial impulse was selfish. I wanted a home for the story that I wanted to write. When I started asking people, everybody said yes. I don't know if Jerry has left, but Jerry too had said yes. But then he withdrew his story for reasons not concerning me, something about he didn't like the contract wording. So everybody I asked actually said yes. And then, once Ranjit said yes and Shanta Gokhale said yes, I feel the ambition for the anthology grew. I knew I was going to have a big publisher, and then there was a corpus of money. I had to stop at 18. I could have had 24 stories for a very boring reason that I wanted everybody to get paid somewhat decently so it would get further divided. And I thought 18 was a good number to kind of cap at, a dozen and a half. Oh, how I chose. Yeah. So I think that's what we started off speaking about. For me, there are a lot of anthologies on Bombay. One that Jerry and Shanta have edited, an anthology called Maya Nagri, which is a curated anthology of existing works, includes translated works. Jerry and Naresh have edited an anthology called Bombay Meri Jaan, which again has everyone from Manto to Pico Iyer. Editing an anthology retrospectively allows, I think, for us to be fairer in a term that in a way that people understand fairness or would value fairness, and I can make sure that I'm covering many different kinds of voices, that I'm covering translation. There have been new anthologies on Bombay which are by single writers, so Marzban Shroff, Vikram Chandra. There hasn't actually been an anthology with new writing, which was on commission. It was a difficult exercise choosing. I started off with some writers who I knew would have differential points of view. Like I said, I was interested in the diversity, in the quality of the writer's relationship with Bombay. I didn't want more than 3 writers who were born and brought up. I wanted a few writers who are not in the country anymore. I did want writers who would speak from communities that we don't hear much from. But I didn't want it to be a DEI exercise, and it's not a perfect exercise. I didn't want to include stories just because I want to, make this book look like we are fulfilling some kind of a mandate. There have been a couple of reviews, I think one in particular that pointed out that the reasoning for inclusion is not clear. But the review also said that all the stories are brilliant. So I think quality is a fantastic reason for inclusion, but there's much more to be done. I want to end the answer by quoting the poet Arvind Krishna Malhotra, who said, and I've quoted him in the intro as well, that no anthology is objective. So anybody else commissioning the anthology, even today in 2025, the mix would be different, and that's what makes it my anthology, I guess. And I'm really happy with all the stories in it. 100% no. I thought this would be a quick exercise. Like I said, the impulse was selfish. I thought it'll be 2 to 3 months. I'm asking fairly good writers. But I do want to say, no, but I do want to say that actually 4 writers in the anthology, and surprise of surprise, including Ranjit, are first-time fiction writers. So Ranjit, Raghu, Pratyush, and Jairaj, but they are all known for their writing and work in other contexts. So I was assured of quality in that sense, but it took 2 years. I had another job, but it took 2 years. I hadn't anticipated that I would have to talk to agents of half of these writers, and that writers would be complaining about the wording of the contract, things like that. So I really enjoyed doing it, but and people have asked me if there's a part 2, and people have asked me if there's a Bombay, if there's a Delhi and a Bangalore version. I would love somebody else to do that and invite me to write a story, because as a novelist, I want to be selfish and focus on my own writing. When I complained to Ranjit that, it took really long, it could have been much quicker, Ranjit said, but it shows. So I thought that was a good compliment.
I think I can rightly call you all hello Mumbai cars. So I do not have a question as such, but I was really so very fascinated when you all spoke about Mumbai. So I'm a Goan. I'm based in Goa, and last year, all of a sudden, it just struck me. Half an hour before, I made a plan to go to Bombay. All of a sudden, without telling anybody, it was on Independence Day. I wanted to do something freely for myself, and I don't know why I chose Bombay, because Dandeli was also in my list, but I chose Bombay. Dandeli. So, and the money would permit me for Dandeli, but then the Bombay was really, it was kind of very achanak say. It was very much. And then what happened was I took my younger brother with me. And this is everything is planned half an hour before. I have no bus tickets, no train tickets, nothing. But I just thought, okay, I want to do something freely. And when I thought freely, Bombay came in my mind. So what happened next? I went to Bombay, and the traffic, and I do not know anybody there. It's just me, and nothing, and I had 5K, 4.5. So it was, yeah, yeah. So it was like a 5K, and then we went to Bombay and all. But then it was just 4 days I stayed. Like, however, we managed 4 days I stayed, and Bombay really changed. A part of me, it changed, and I write poems. So as soon as I came from Bombay, I sat and I tried to write poems, but not, I could not. Like, I wrote 2 times. I said I wrote 4 lines, and I stopped. I could not finish. But then I think today, with all those words and inspirations from you all, I can finish my poems and finish my poem. And I would really like it to be checked by you all 3. I would really love it.
Ranjit is the poetry anthologizer.
Well, Bombay, the forever muse, as we said. Anyone else?
Like you, I'm never
Rakshanda
going to write
had a
another
question.
poetry anthology.
Before you go, Rakshanda, I just have one thing I wanted to add in my response to you. I don't mean to be cavalier about, the inclusion and the exclusion. As a journalistic editor, we have more control about what people give us when you have a brief. This was almost a co-creation. So while the best I can do is pick a writer who I think will respond with a story that might fill a gap or a white space, sometimes they don't do that. And I think that's okay, because I also feel writers, no matter what their background and where they're coming from, have a right to write about whatever they want. So just because you come from a certain socio-demographic background, your story needn't necessarily be set there. So when I asked Lindsay Pereira, because his other writing has all been set in the East Indian community in Malad, I assumed, huh? Is it Goan? Also, one of his stories is East Indian too. He's written more than one book though, right? Yeah, so, but his story was not on that. And that was okay by me. I didn't feel Lindsay had to be held to task and kind of cover that. So I just wanted to add that.
A quick footnote to
Rakshanda
that.
had a.
Oh,
Very
sorry.
quick then.
Come.
Oh, sorry, you adding something? Is
No,
it?
no, just a very quick footnote, Rakshanda. Just to say that you yourself made a transition in your editorial strategy from giving people a brief to offering people an invitation.
Something like that. I think in fiction, a story just owes things to the story, nothing even to the writer or the editor after a point.
Maybe we've exhausted the time for this session.
No, we'd like to hear your question.
Okay, so last year I edited this anthology on Delhi, Basti and Darbar. It's outside, should you want to see it. But I was answering one of these questions in one of these sessions, and I wanted to kick myself because I forgot to include the expat experience. Now, just as Delhi, I'm sure in Mumbai too, you must have had people who've come to stay for short spells, not Indians, posted here, journalist, a diplomat, or what have you. Did you have any of these experiences that, an outsider looking in, but not from an Indian eye, from another eye?
I had a story by an American who speaks perfect Hindi and is married to a girl from Bombay, so is very familiar with the kind of club culture. I didn't like the story. The story didn't work out. He knew that as well, so we had to drop it. So I think, like, you can try to be inclusive, but then quality becomes the filter. We do have a few stories by Indians who have lived abroad for a bit and then come back. But I did have an American story, to your point. Yeah.
All right, with that, we wrap the session. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you, Anindita, Ranjit, Shubhangi. And the book is available outside, so anyone who wants to take a peek at the book and buy it, please do so.